Serious people with religious extremist parents. What was it like growing up? Had an exorcism in the living room once. Also didn't get all my vaccines and now I don't know what I'm at risk for since those tests to see what vaccines you've had are so expensive. Oh, making friends was awkward in grade school because I couldn't watch the shows/listen to the music they did. Edit. Thank you so much everyone for the advice about getting vaccinated. I'll try to set up a visit with my doctor soon. Some of my earliest memories are driving with my whole family in the Suburban and my dad telling us all that the great Christian persecution was going to begin soon and we all needed to be prepared for them to take us away from him and my mom and how terrible it would be. He got very into Y2K prepping as well and I remember calling my friends and telling them to believe in Jesus because the world was going to end and we needed to all be ready. I also remember being confused as to why I didn't have any good school was pretty rough for me. The family reputation you literally being suicidal? OMG yes. Was actually told they would rather mourn a dead child than have a living embarrassment. I lack sentiment in any form and I'm almost entirely incapable of love. If somebody hurts me, I automatically sever our relationship in my head and it's like I never knew them. I grew up incredibly vulnerable to conspiracy theories because facts didn't matter. I grew up with no sense of empathy because the church told me what and how to feel about all things. I grew up with no self-confidence because I was expected to be perfect and could not be. I grew up with extreme self-loathing because if I wasn't happy it's because I wasn't close enough to God. Depression was my own fault because I wasn't close enough to God. Illness was my own fault because I wasn't close enough to God. If I have financial pain it's because I'm not close enough to God. Now that I'm almost 30 I've left that cesspool of lies and am learning how to be a human who feels empathy, sees facts, and is capable of love. It's flipping hard. Mentioned this before. My parents are very religious. We grew up in a church that 100% believed men were one. And they were the reason that the church was successful. Dress codes for women and they were treated as equals until it mattered. I remember not being able to read Harry Potter. Sex wasn't ever talked about in a good sense. That type of stuff. The worst it ever got was when my buddy in high school hacked my Facebook and posted that I was gay. I've never seen my dad so mad. As a very athletic person, I was terrified of him. Screaming. Saying that the gays are going to try and persecute us Christians. Years later, my parents changed a lot. For the better. They don't believe in gay marriage or abortion. But they don't force it down people's throat. They even went to a gay wedding to support a family friend. Which is a massive step in the right direction. They also don't go to that church anymore. My mom was like "Beep them." I'd hear my mom constantly complaining that how I am not religious and a shame to the family. Occasionally there is even a comment about how me not being religious is the reason to my parents' health being bad. When I was young my mom was cautious with who I was friends with. People practicing aita religion were a strict no-no. I have a friend since college and my mom constantly worries that I am going to convert. I was always under my parents' watch. They were helicopter parents so that I couldn't do anything against our religion. I was always the weird kid because my clothing had to be appropriate and anyone that wasn't our religion I had to try to convince them to come to our church or what was the point of being friends with them. Women weren't equal and we were told that everything we were doing was practicing to be a good wife and mother someday and that it was our true calling and nothing else mattered. If we planned to go to college that was great because it could help us teach our children. Sundays were for church only or church-related activities. No TV. No playing outside. Etc. We were just normal enough that we thought we were normal until we grew up and realized that we didn't have any self-esteem or value in ourselves without the church giving us our worth and value. I'm still trying to detox and to find ways to raise my kids because I know I don't want to raise them like I was, but I also don't know the right way to raise them any other way, and I fall into the pattern of being like my parents. Wasn't allowed to watch Star Wars or E.T. because demons were going to manifest during Armageddon and will look like the characters from films and children wouldn't be scared of them. I grew up believing Jesus was going to come back any moment and take the church, and we had to be right with God or we wouldn't be taken. I spent a lot of my childhood muttering apologies to Jesus for my thoughts and actions just in case. Other than the constant reminders of the devil's influence on every single thing we thought and did, and being told we would go to hell for eternal damnation if we didn't follow this singular path, it was fairly average. I couldn't go to dances or any sort of secular party. Went to church 3 times a week. And any time the doors were open. I could only have friends that were in our church. And then half of them weren't approved of. I couldn't date until I was 16, and then only girls in the church. One half of which weren't approved of. I couldn't listen to rock music, which in adulthood made me an expert on rock music. Not my parents so much as my grandparents. But my parents carried on the traditions for most of my life. No shows or movies with talking animals encourages friendship with demons. Women wear ankle-length skirts/dresses. Don't cut their hair. Keep their hair in a tight modest bun for church or any time they wear it up. Purity promises and rings at the start of puberty. Women do not work outside the home unless absolutely necessary. When my brother got outed as gay, my grandmother nearly tried to exorcise the devil out of him. Church was cult-like. Youth group was a brainwashing session. I've been made to read the Bible multiple times over as my homework instead of real schooling. I'm an atheist now, undoubtedly because of how religion was forced down my throat past my tears growing up. I've had to learn not to hate every religion or religious person I come across. My years at church broke my sense of self-worth and my moral compass until very recently. I have a friend with super Christian adopted parents. She is a lesbian-leaning bi girl and her parents are super condemning about it. She's Christian too. But it goes to the point that her parents don't let her watch horror movies or let boys into her room when she has made it clear she basically only likes girls. She is currently to the point that she ranted about her whole situation to me, and it sounded like she's going down a suicidal path. Oh. Where to start? Spankings that were borderline beatings for every offense. I wasn't allowed to talk back at all. Asking why? Was talking back. I spent my entire childhood believing that all my problems were because I didn't love God enough. When I was 9, I was convinced that if I didn't shape up, God was going to kill me. So I spent 6 months being a perfect angel but also living in constant terror. Just completely convinced that if I did one thing wrong, lightning would blow me off the planet. Last thing I'll mention is how my parents wouldn't feed me as a child if I talked back. Many nights I was sent home with no food for the most minor of infractions. Finishing a chore a minute or two late. They have largely turned things around. And even apologized for some of these actions. But I still have no interest in talking to them. I still feel a lot of shame about my body and about having sex. And I'm almost 27 years old. And married. I still feel like I can't really tell my parents anything about my life that's at all personal because I feel like they'll either judge me and guilt me about sin in my life or they'll give me their standard advice. Just pray about it. I don't think they'll ever really know anything about me. I had a fair-sized collection of early edition Yu-Gi-Oh cards as a kid. After coming home for a visit, I find them to be missing. Turns out they were burned because they could be used to summon demons.